and we happen to be stuck with it without a memory of what we're really to be doing in life. So all of those things are common to these three writers. And one of the problems is, now we're no longer, it's apparent, we're no longer just talking about the book of Revelation. We are now discussing, is there a common core belief, understanding, view that's common to all religions, or all the major religions? And so is this, are we alone here? Is Christianity so unique, so special, that we have nothing in common with the Buddhists and the Hindus and whoever else is out there, with Islam even, or the Jews? Maybe all of us are searching for a return to the common cause. And that's ultimately what we're after in this presentation.
So, Hal, if I understand you, then what you're saying is that we, in this new understanding of the universes, the various different planets, the various different solar systems that are here, that we have to be more universal in our understanding of.
It is universal.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I guess that's right. There is quite a broad outlook that we need to adopt. We have to understand that this is a big, wide world out there. Now, on the one hand, those are some of the similarities. On the other hand, there are some differences. In other words, in adopting what sounds like a reasonable, broad view of our place in the world and our desire to return to God, what if we have to give up something? Maybe are there some understandings that we currently have that are not going to work anymore? And what things might not work anymore? For example, this is going to be hard for some people to give up. And it shouldn't be, but suppose you had to give up the idea of an apocalypse that was going to bring the world to an end the day after tomorrow. Now, maybe not the day after tomorrow, but there are some people who say, aha, you see, the world is going to end, we're going to be all swept up into heaven. And while that might be true, the commitment that people are making to that idea might not be valid and warranted. Maybe the idea of the apocalypse instead is, what's the meaning after all? It's the meaning of the war of all against all. There will be a time, it is said, in which it will be husband against wife, man against woman, brother against sister, race against race, and so forth and so on. And there are some people who are willing to believe that that is the kind of society and world that we're headed into. And if it is, however, it is not the end of the world, because the apocalypse in all of these writers is basically an episode in which occurs at the end of, or near the beginning of, every major cycle in man's development. In other words, there are multiple apocalypses. And so that is going to require a significant change in the way people look at the book of Revelations.
And now, is this what these three authors that you've been
All
talking
four
about,
of them.
all four of them, yeah, I'm sorry, there was four of them.
Are really now discussing the fact that when and as and if they occur, they are just part of the evolution of mankind. Sometimes a bad evolution, perhaps. Not a comfortable evolution, perhaps.
Right.
But not a final one either.
Mm-hmm.
Until such day, far in the distant future, when we are completely changed.
I see.
what are the other differences that are out there that won't be tolerable anymore, that won't be acceptable in this kind of view? How about the letters to the seven churches? In early part of Revelation, the seven churches are defined as the cities, Ephesus and Sardis and Laodicea and Philadelphia and so forth and so on. These cities are thought to have been actual cities. They were actual cities. And that Revelations was written to those seven churches. And they were told to do this and do that and so forth. It's possible, I suppose, to continue to believe that. But none of these four accept it quite that way. All of them see it as stages or parts of the evolution that man is going through. Let me give you some idea of what that is. Swedenborg says those seven churches represent the seven evolutions, changes, major changes in the development of humankind. He said, yeah, well, it's churches too. The church is changing. These are new. There is a new church now that we're in, for example, but it is not to be understood in physical terms. It should be understood as a spiritual development. Something similar is done by Steiner. I'm sorry. And in changing man's understanding, the church then, remember, should be understood as a meeting place. It is the meeting place of the body, soul, and spirit, and that's the essence under which we concentrate. Steiner said that the seven churches represent seven time periods. 7 periods dating from the time when the continent of Atlantis sank, dating from the time when there was another civilization altogether. And we are now in the 5th of those periods. We are in the Church of Sardis. We are soon to enter and to become acquainted with the Church of Philadelphia and the 1,000 years of peace. That's also true, but now understood as a historical time period in man's evolution. Casey says, yes, it is also a change in man's evolution. He, however, counts it as a change in man's growth in the endocrine system and the chakras that we all have, according to him. Ruckert is a little bit closer to inner structure to Casey, and so that shares with him some of those same ideas. But and so it is, you see, there is a completely different understanding of the seven churches. But that is now the beginning of the changes that'll have to be taking place in our interpretation of the book of Revelations. How about the 4 horsemen? Well, everybody knows the first horse or 4 horsemen. Here's the pale horse and the red horse and the black horse. What is that all about? Well, I'm not so sure I know what the standard establishment interpretation is, but for example, in Swedenborg says, when you look at all of the references to horses in scriptures, let's go back and see wherever they're mentioned and put them all together, the common belief and understanding is that they represent 4 changes in man's understanding of the spiritual life. Okay, quite different from what we've viewed it or been told to view it in the past. Well, not only that, what then were to do with our understandings of other religions? Are we now quite so sure that we have the only interpretation that's available when it comes to, for example, understanding Buddhists and Hindus and Islam and the Jews and other major religions out there who are also part of and concerned with us and we with them. After all, if I am in God and God is in me, and they too are in God, well, pretty soon we have to begin to deal with each other quite differently. Before we go any further, there was something you had said before about our changes in thinking that are going to be needed in the future, and I think our audience would be interested in that too. What were you telling me?
Well, ultimately, we today have a different worldview than when much of the Bible was written. And it's changed a great deal since we created the creeds of the church in the 4th century. And ultimately, because we have a different worldview, it has to change our way of thinking about God. And I guess from my standpoint is the fact that as our universe expands, if we think God is out there, up in the sky, the problem is as we get to know more about our universe, the further away God becomes. If he's out there, like the old people or the old time people thought that he was above the clouds, but he was just above the clouds. In the ancient way of thinking, he was not that far from us. But now, our problem is, it's just like anything else. If you're looking at something far away, he gets smaller and smaller, or God, in my thinking, gets to be smaller and smaller. So the problem comes with the thinking from the 4th century. It allows us to make God seem even smaller today than he was 200 years ago, 400 years ago, 800 years ago, because of our worldview changing and our understanding of the universe. So ultimately it comes down, well, if I feel this presence of God, how do I develop a close relationship? Is the kingdom of God something that's going to happen in the future, or is the kingdom of God amongst us right now?
And he is.
I think so.
Yes.
You know,
I see.
so
Yes.
so ultimately in understanding Revelations and understanding this, we have a different worldview.
Okay. Well, let me pick up on something, some phrase you used. The world has changed, but our thinking hasn't. Is that maybe it tends to sum it up a little bit?
Sure.
I had written down here something similar, that is, but I took it in terms of challenges. So I wanted to identify some of the challenges in the why go to all this trouble? What do we care about whether or not we understand Revelations properly, or if there is a core understanding to all religions? What difference does it make? Well, the difference it makes is that there are going to be some enormous challenges in the years ahead, I think. And let me just tell you what I think some of those challenges are.
Okay.
In the first place, and this is off the beaten track, right? This is supposed to be controversial, right? Okay. The UFOs are coming. Now, do I know that? Well, not really. Do I think that they're coming? Well, I think that's some probability of that. And what happens if they do? Well, they will be sure to advise us, according to our own scientists, that there are 10 million inhabitable